Life is funny. You can have everything thought out, can think you're on the path to greatness, or failing that, at least happiness. You take the steps, grind the extracurriculars, pull the all nighters, neglect family and at times friends. You do everything to become what you think you need to be. Not if it is truly what you want, but you do it for that end goal. So, what do you do when that goal seems to be drifting further and further away? Coming from a Caribbean household, there seem to be only three viable career paths: doctor, lawyer, engineer. This messaging is so common that it's become a rueful joke amongst my generation. But who could blame our parents, who came out of a time of uncertainty and strife, for clinging to the idea of social mobility and for wanting it for their children? And so, if they made it known, at times to the point of badgering if we're being honest, it was only out of love. Growing up, I always considered myself to be a B student. Rarely at the top of the list, but always performing to a decent standard. If I made 95% in an exam, I'd come home to a question: why didn't you do better? And so, I spent much of my life associating my worth with my academic performance. And truthfully, I completely internalized that messaging. But like any other child, I quite loved the softer pursuits of drawing, reading novels, and writing stories. I tore through large fantasy tomes like Aragon, Song of Ice and Fire, and the Inkheart trilogy, while also mixing in some warrior cat books, Twilight, and other young adult novels in there. I spent much of my early teens writing and reading fanfiction, and occasionally publishing the odd, unfinished work on Wattpad. But it was anime that truly nurtured my love for drawing. Some of my earliest works, if you can call them that, were anime fan art. One that I remember fondly was an illustration of Naruto and Sasuke from the anime Naruto that I did in Microsoft Paint of all things. While it was no professional work, I was proud of my creations. But inherently, I knew art wasn't considered a viable pursuit for a culture obsessed with the doctor, lawyer, engineer matrix. And so I continued to study. At 15, I chose the subjects that would get me into the medical path, though a few years later, I realized that I didn't want the lifestyle that came with being a doctor. I worked to make the best grades in my O levels, A levels, and the SATs, and in 2018, after a much needed gap year, I landed on the shores of the United States to pursue engineering at a top 10 university. And it was hell. What no one tells you about these top 10 schools is everyone is incredibly smart. The gap year that helped me recover from years of academic stress had put me at a disadvantage compared to these fresh out of high school kids who were seemingly genetically engineered to be the best. I struggled and struggled throughout my first year. I had a scholarship to upkeep, and so I isolated myself just to keep afloat and to make the grades necessary to maintain it. I couldn't go back home now. I couldn't be a failure. My sophomore year, I resolved to let go of some of that stress. I wanted to make time for my friends, to enjoy some non academic interests, which at this point for me included crochet, reading tons of manga, and gaming on the Nintendo Switch. I was succeeding too, and I finally felt like I was achieving that balance between academic life and personal fulfillment. And then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Okay, no, I'm just joking, but isn't that literally what COVID felt like? While masses were falling ill, borders were closing, and nature was, funnily enough, healing, we still had to perform. As classes went online, however, I felt like I finally came into my stride. While I struggled at times with the difficult engineering course load I was taking, I felt like I had finally figured out how to make it all work. 2022 came fast, and by summer I had graduated with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I moved across the country to take an internship at a biotech firm, where I truly had the time of my life. Finally, I was getting closer and closer to that goal of social mobility, and I was soaring. But all that goes up must come down. Late that summer, I was required to return to my home country as a requirement of my scholarship. I cried a lot, mourning the life that I had seemed to be building, and how it was also suddenly being torn away. But all was not over, right? I had still achieved the engineering degree. I still had potential, right? The truth is, the title of this video is kinda clickbait because I've never truly worked as a mechanical engineer. I've never really got the chance to. My home country has one of the most educated populations in the region, and sadly, one of the highest levels of underemployment. And so, the job I finally did attain was largely busy work. General reports, Excel spreadsheets, speeches, and presentations are all essential to any business, of course, but it just wasn't what I had studied for. Where was the groundbreaking research, the new technologies, the application of goddamn differential equations? Try as I might to find something more in line with my experience, it felt like my ceiling was growing closer and closer, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I fell into a deep depression. My self-worth was at an all-time low, and I spent every day at work just waiting to go home. With each day that passed, I felt like the lessons I had learned at college were fading away from disuse. I tried to take solace in my home life, taking up every hobby you could think of: sourdough bread, home gardening, baking, and for a bit, even web development. But nothing truly satisfied that itch, that desire for a return of my sense of meaning. Late last year, I remembered my childhood love for drawing. I first tried on my iPad, then jumped to traditional when I realized I struggled to even draw a straight line. I bought sketchbooks and a bunch of pencils to start. I practiced Loomis heads, attempted gesture drawing, and drew lots and lots of circles and boxes. It was hard at first. I've had many awful drawings that completely wrecked my ego. But as I tried new mediums like gouache and watercolor, and as I looked at other amazing creators on YouTube and saw how free and expressive they were, I tried to let go of that intrinsic perfectionism. I realized perhaps I can find my meaning through art. I wish I could say that I don't still have feelings of disappointment for the path my life has taken, but truthfully, I'm still coming to terms with it all. And I know my regret won't be solved overnight by starting an art YouTube, but 3 things that you can consider if my experience has at all resonated with you are: first, don't let academics and career define your self-worth. It's not too late to decouple your need for capitalistic validation and to instead find more intrinsic forms of meaning. Second, find your community, your tribe. These are the people who make it all worth it, and something that I'm still trying to build for myself. And finally, don't be afraid to create. If you're not careful, art can just become the new yardstick by which you judge your self-worth. Do the radical thing and just enjoy it. For me, it's all still a work in progress. I have better days and days where I feel like shouting at the heavens just how unfair everything has been. But I guess I can say that the good days are adding up. One thing I can say is my mediocre art is helping me find my meaning. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you for coming along on this journey with me. I'd love to make a close-knit community of people who enjoy doodling, art, and painting. So if at all you enjoyed this video, please give a like and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more. This video was more of a channel introduction and a motivation, but I have a lot of other ideas for interesting videos going forward. But until then, this is Etchr signing off.